There's an old hymn that says, we're living in a strange land. One verse says, well, I don't exactly know what's going on in the world today. Don't know what there is to say about the way the people are treating each other, not like brothers. We are indeed living in a strange land, a strange time which tests our faith and strains our relationships. This notion of Christian community is a vast and organic concept, and I've thought about it in terms of past, present, and future. One, what was Jesus expecting? What were Jesus' expectations for his followers? And how are we living into those expectations? And how do we, in the words of Professor Eddie Glaude Jr., begin again? Christian community is not something we build or design or engineer. It is a way that is ordained by Christ, a way of life. Christian community begins with relationship. God seeks us out for relationship with the Lord and with one another. Now, these relationships are intentional and require a commitment to care for one another. And the ultimate demonstration of that caring is God sending God's own Son to die for our sin. I like to think about Christian community as defined and demonstrated in that second chapter of Acts. And it says, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teachings and to fellowship, for the breaking of bread. Everyone was filled with awe at the wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together. They were together and had everything in common. Acts 2:42 through 44. I think this helps us to form a foundation of what Christian community looks like. Now, understand that Christian community is not some passive, weepy ideal. Christian community includes a cross-cultural, countercultural, inclusive, God-centered, radical, prayerful, and missional being. It is a dynamic organism, and God calls us to live into it through faith in Jesus Christ. So how are we doing? Specifically, how are we doing as the Church of Jesus Christ? How are we doing as human beings? Well, I think we have to take off our rose-colored glasses and take a sober and somber look at ourselves, because we are the church. I'm a news junkie, and I look at the news from several resources. I hear discord, I hear affirmation, I hear pain, I hear joy, I hear apathy, I hear struggle, I hear victory. But you know what I don't hear and what I don't see, even in my own neighborhood and in my circle of friends and acquaintances, I don't hear a devotion. I don't hear a devotion to the teachings of Christ. I don't see or hear about people being in fellowship, but more people being in conflict. I hear about people being killed by acquaintances, people being killed by strangers, people being killed by law enforcement officers, people being killed by a global pandemic, people being killed by self-inflicted wounds from weapons or narcotics. Now, this is not to say that the whole world is in a shambles. I'm not saying that the church is in a shambles. But what I am saying is that the church, our church, the Church of Jesus Christ, has been less than vigilant in leading the way to life as Jesus expected of us. In short, we've not lived into Christian community. When I read about the horrific murders of Breonna Taylor, and when I watched the murders of Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, when I heard about the deaths of C.T. Vivian and Congressman John Lewis, all of that together deepened my thoughts as to whether we as a nation, as the Church of Jesus Christ, are capable of Christian community. Just a few days ago, I saw the video of Jacob Blake in Kenosha, Wisconsin, being shot 7 times in the back. And then I saw a 17-year-old being held for shooting 3 people, killing 2. These are anecdotal, but I believe that they signal something in our culture that has taken us far away from Christian community, the community that Jesus envisioned. Now, the church cannot stop these violent confrontations, but the church is called to confront violence, and it's called to be a radical and prayerful presence in the community, in every community. How we do that calls for the church to engage in adaptive change, which means we've got to ask for wisdom and discernment that teaches us how to be the church in these volatile times. Not the church of 1955, but the church of now. How do we minister to people? How do we minister to communities? How do we model Christian community now? So we know that Jesus expected us to be loving and caring for one another, to fellowship with one another, to devote ourselves to the Word of God, to pray for one another, to advocate for one another. How do we get there? Professor Eddie Glaude, in his book, Begin Again, says that this country, and I would dare say, church, that we too, as a church, the universal church, the Church Catholic, started out with a lie. All men are created equal. That was never the case. That was not the case in society, and it was not the case in the church. And Professor Glaude said, in order for us to get where we need to be as a society, and I submit as a church, we've got to dispel that lie. We've got to start over and look at ourselves in the mirror and say to ourselves that we have got to begin again believing what Christ has shared with us early in his teachings. We've got to own up to our complicity in the evils that perplex us every day. We've got to ask some hard questions. Do we believe that all people are created equal? Do we believe that? Do we believe that we are to love our neighbor as we love ourselves, not just the neighbors we like? Do we believe in the sharing of all things in common? Do we believe in the breaking of bread together? Do we believe in devoting ourselves to the scriptures? I believe that God is yet calling us to be in relationship with the Lord and with one another, because God is omnipotent and God at the same time is prayerful and forgiving. We have the opportunity to respond affirmatively to God's beckoning. We can't do it on our own. As the song says, we're living in a strange land.